Buenas tardes. Hola. Gracias por invitarme a este importante evento. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. One of the reasons I was drawn to feminism, there were many reasons I was drawn to feminism, but there is one in particular that I want to mention now. And it's because feminism is not only concerned with inequalities between men and women, which is important enough, of course. But in addition to that, feminism is also concerned with changing social structures that discriminate people because of their race, their ethnicity, their nationality, their age, their ability, their sexual orientation, their religion. And I think that's because in the end, we are all dealing with the same mindset of power over, in which some people believe that they are superior, that they are entitled to privilege. And the others, quote unquote, those constructed as the others, have internalized to some extent this dominant ideology and start to believe that they are inferior. Despite all the resistance, of course, historical resistance that has allowed to have so much progress. It is not a coincidence that the feminist women who in Nicaragua engaged me and other men in the feminist struggle were former activists of the social justice movement in my country, in this case, the Sandinista movement in my country. And they were very committed with social justice in broader terms, committed with the rights of the poor, of the peasant, of the indigenous people, of the workers in unsafe jobs, and also opposing external imperialistic powers. These feminist women, were clear that gender equality for development needs an entire new social order, and that for that to happen, it was important also to integrate men in this struggle. The oppression based on gender is, of course, obviously more damaging to women, but men are also oppressed, if not by gender. The majority of men are also oppressed by this other unequal system of power. So I think it's in all our best interest to join with women, to join with people from other genders, to transform this status quo. But there is a challenge here. And the challenge is, there are many challenges, but one of these is the power issues between our organizations, between our coalitions, between our networks, between our movements. The use of power in a positive way, in a constructive way, the power to transform societies, to create something new, is relatively not so widespread in comparison to the use of power in negative form, power to control, to dominate, which has been the pervasive and historical use of power. I think most of us grew up on the model of powers in which we have authoritarian figures, people thinking only on their own benefits, of taking advantage of others. And even when we become part of movements, social justice movements, we resort to these models because we don't have much other positive models to use to exercise our power. So I think it's very important that we question ourselves. How are we using our power within our organizations? And this is particularly relevant for men in social justice movements and in the gender equality movement. How are we exerting our power in our organizations? How about in our families? Are we only promoting gender equality in speeches, in publications, but retaining our privilege, our male privilege, in our office, in our homes? These are very important questions that we need to ask ourselves. And I started thinking about this when I was part of the Sandinista youth movement in the 80s in Nicaragua, And I gradually realized how many leaders, well-intentioned at the beginning, started reproducing the same model of power over that they were seemingly trying to change. In some way, they started imitating at the oppressor. And they were so busy trying to change the big social structures, fighting the big battles, that they neglected to remain vigilant of their own way of using power, their pattern of domination in their lives, in the way they relate to others, in the way they use resources, particularly public resources. And here is one of the reasons why the coalition, Men Engaged, the alliance for the one I work, was created. Men Engaged was created as a platform in which men and also women working with men and boys can support each other, in which we can hold each other accountable, so that we can increase our capacity to live our values in our practice, setting high standard of feminist work so that we can really contribute to transformation of men and boys toward gender equality and support the women's rights agenda. This is most easy to say than to do it in practice. We are a coalition of more than 400 NGOs, grouped in 6 regional networks across the globe. And within each regional network, there are also many country networks working together, exchanging their experience in how to work with men and boys from a feminist perspective, exchanging lessons learned, educational materials, promoting joint advocacy initiatives on issues like men supporting sexual and reproductive health and rights, men as part of the solution to end violence against women and against children, men as caregivers, as involved fathers. To give you some example of the work that Men Engaged as a coalition of NGOs do, in Africa, for instance, last year, some of our Men Engaged partners were working on capacity, on promoting workshops for men who are in the parliaments, parliamentarians, men in governmental offices, governmental representatives, men in uniformed personnel, trying to sensitize these men about the importance of ending violence against women. And they made these men sign a pledge, committing themselves to use their power in their public offices for preventing and responding to violence against women and girls. And this is a very important work. We need to reach out to those men in the position of power. And unfortunately, given sexism, given misogyny in our societies, many of these men disregard women's voices, disregard women's analysis. So those men like me, like others who consider ourselves as allies, as women's allies, we need to support women's leadership. And we need also to tell these men that gender equality is something that matters a lot and is compromising and putting in risk our overall development. And we need to tell these men what women have been telling us for many, many decades ago. In Latin America, as another example of the work that Men Engaged is doing, recently I was part of an interesting initiative through using the new technologies, using online discussions, Google Hangouts as this platform, for discussing among men and women from 15 countries in the region, in the Latin American region, how can men be more supportive of women's access to sexual and reproductive health service? How can men and why men should be more responsible in terms of assuming their part of responsibility for family planning and assuming their part in the contraceptive use. And this was a very interesting initiative because it was low cost. I mean, we didn't have to move people from one country to another country to do this exchange, and still was very powerful. I remember one of the testimonies of a Mexican man who were sharing about how he was so close to their partner, his female partner, who went through a difficult pregnancy and who had to go through an abortion, and how close he was with her, supporting her, he wanted to even take her pain and her suffering. And at the same time, this man was reflecting that even though he was part of that pregnancy, because they did it together, he was clear that at the end, the last word, the ultimate decision rests on her, because this is happening in her body. And that's something that he cannot assume. So those kind of testimonies were very powerful, sharing online in an online platform. Another example I want to give you is in the case of our partners in South Asia. In South Asia, our men engaged partners are working at this moment in collaboration with the International Association of Women for Radio and Television. And they are preparing a traveling film festival. They are selecting 50 films, documentaries, videos that provide stories about men and their struggles around gender relationships. And they are also working on a facilitator guide so that after presenting these films in public forums, they can develop discussions, conversation with people. And this idea is going to be also shared in other regions with our other men engaged regional partners in the other regions. And I think this is also another powerful methodology to work with men and boys and to engage men, women, all people in conversation about what happened with men, how can men change, and how men are changing toward gender equality. I would say as a conclusion that we need to promote changes in men and boys at all levels. We need to continue promoting changes in men from the most intimate level, digging in men's hearts, in men's minds, in their relationships, their interpersonal relationships men engage in their offices, in their homes, in their communities, to the most macro level, to the public arena, on social policies, on laws that shape men's life. And this means that we need to promote different strategies. We need to be very creative, working at these different levels. And that's why we need to collaborate more, because there is no single organization that can implement all these different strategies and work on different levels at the same time. We need to work in collaboration, in partnership, in coalition, in network, across sectors, to really make changes in our societies. Power operates everywhere. Power operates in the most intimate level, in the bed, in the bedrooms, in the living rooms, in the offices, in the big offices, governmental buildings, in UN nations buildings. And we need to challenge men's patriarchal power in all these places, and also challenge all these institutions that continue reinforcing men's patriarchal power. And at the same time, we need to support men's positive contribution, men's positive use of power. And this is my call, that we all have a role to play as men, as women, as transgender, in promoting this transformation. Thank you very much.